Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to our sixth and final edition, for now, of our cooking classes with Maid, Marien's Catering, me, Sam, and our featured chef of the day. This is my sister, Rachel Berthelet.
Hi.
She just graduated culinary school, and I get to have her today as a helper as we get things ready. Not that any of you guys need any help with this recipe. It's pretty straightforward, but she came back to come help me out for the summer, and you'll be seeing a little bit more of her throughout the next couple months as we move into getting back to normal and being able to serve you guys in small groups, farmers markets, and kind of around the Esterhazy area. So we're really excited to have her. It's really going to be fun today to get to work with someone in the kitchen. I usually just talk to you guys over the webcam, and I don't know if you're listening. I assume you are because I get all your comments and feedback later, but for once there's actually someone here with me, so I think that adds a little bit of fun. We look a little bit alike, so you know, we're dressed similarly, so just try not to get us confused. Just follow the sound of my voice. It's kind of like when we're at yoga. If you're following the sound of my voice, you really don't need to see which one of us is doing what. You'll be able to follow along. So today we're doing butter chicken. Really exciting to do today because it's a personal favorite of mine. It was requested by my good friend Donna, who is a pampered chef consultant and does a lot of her own home cooking, and she wanted to know what my recipe would be for making a butter chicken sauce, not from a bag. So today we're going to make a butter chicken sauce. Actually, in its essence, is a really easy sauce to make. It's a wonderfully creamy, mildly spiced dish based on the more or less Indian cuisine of murg makhani, which is similar to the British style of tikka masala. So not super spicy curry dish based in a curry flavor. We're going to talk a lot about curry. We're going to talk a little bit about naan bread today. And we're going to make the sauce, we're going to make the chicken in my own style, which kind of represents the best parts of what a tandoor oven can do, because most of us don't have a tandoor oven at home. Tandoor oven, if you don't know, is a really large, sometimes clay-based oven that heats up really high heat. So actually it would be more on the ground, and you would insert meat into it on a skewer, on a stick, or on a grate. And it heats up to almost 900 degrees Fahrenheit. So something you really can't replicate at home, which is also why I didn't want to introduce the traditional style naan bread. So we're going to talk a little bit about some similar naan bread, some bought naan bread, but you could definitely make a naan bread at home on your own if you wanted. That would be very similar to a traditional style, but traditionally you would see that yeast style bread in a tandoor oven. Again, the chicken we're going to cook in a replicated tandoor type oven in our regular oven that we all have at home. So a little bit different style, a little bit different process than most people do with the butter chicken, but I guarantee you will not be disappointed by this dish. It is awesome, and I have had so many people ask me kind of what I put into it and how it works. So we're going to go through that today. Really not hard, but let's go over our equipment first before we get started. So in your recipe list, I had Basmati or jasmine rice. So that's the first thing I'm going to cover today. So I'm going to use a jasmine rice. It's a little bit more, it's not temperamental, but it's a little bit lighter. Basmati is really nice too, although sometimes in a small town it's harder to find all those varieties. Jasmine we are able to get here all the time, so I'm going to use jasmine rice today. Jasmine rice we cook 1 to 1. So that means if you're doing 2 cups of rice or 1 cup of rice, you have the equal same amount of stock or water. Of course, we know through all the last cooking classes that it's going to be a much better taste for your rice if you use stock as opposed to water. So we're going to do 1 cup of rice to 1 cup of water. That's going to give me about 4 servings of rice for my butter chicken today. The other thing that we need for that rice is going to be our pot with a little covered lid. Again, depending on how many people you're serving, you might need a bigger pot, but for 1 cup of rice, a little small stock pot is going to do well. The other pot we're using for the butter chicken sauce is a braising pot. I like to use this pot because it gives me a little better surface area to work with. It's going to cook a little faster. But if you have a deeper, a little bit bigger saucepan that you'd like to use, you absolutely can use that as well. Again, we're using the oven today for our chicken. So the other thing we're going to need is a grate of some sort. So I have just like a cooling grate. This is one that I use just for meat. But if you have anything that kind of lifts up your chicken from the pan, that is perfect, because we want to get that nice charred browning Maillard reaction on our chicken. So the other thing you're going to need is a cookie sheet, something with a rim to catch all those extra juices as the chicken cooks in the oven. That cookie sheet we're going to line with tin foil just to keep our juices from sticking to the bottom of the pan. Of course, you don't have to use that. It'll just cause a little bit more work for you when you're cleaning up later. But if you'd like to line your cookie sheet, make your process a little bit easier, that's great. The other thing we're going to use when we're doing our chicken is a little bit of pan spray. You can also use a little bit of oil on a cloth to cover the grate, so that little grate we're putting over the pan to keep the chicken from sticking. Those are the things we need for the chicken. Those are the things we need for the rice. That's the pan we need for the buttered chicken. Now, something I should have gone over before we got kind of into the ingredient list was a question I had about garam masala. So I use a garam masala spice blend that you can buy at most stores. You can just find it in the spices. A garam masala is a specific grouping of spices, so it's the main ingredient in many curries in lots of different parts of Asia. But we would use this one because it has whole blend spices. So if you couldn't find a garam masala, that's okay. One of the things about this recipe, and most of my cooking classes, is talking about ways that we can introduce other things we may have in our fridge, we may kind of have around, that we can use as a substitute for things we might not have on hand. So for a couple strange reasons, mostly because I forgot today, I don't have 2 big tomatoes like I have in the recipe, but I do have some baby tomatoes, and I have some extra tomato paste, so I'm going to sub that in. The other thing that I found, because it is tough to always find like a plain yogurt or a Greek yogurt that is just plain, unsweetened here in town all the time, the other thing that you can use as a substitute is sour cream, which I'm going to use today. Not because I couldn't get it, but because I forgot. So we're going to use that today. The biggest things we really want to see is a spice blend. So something with curry that people don't necessarily know right away is that curry isn't really traditionally an Indian thing. We think of it westernized as an Indian thing because it's kind of become how we understand how certain spices work with Indian food. But if you were to go to India and order something curry, it wouldn't necessarily translate the same way. It's very much a westernized term. And curry really just signifies a spice blend. So I've talked to lots of chefs and sous chefs I've worked with over the years who I asked about curry, who are from India or from different parts of Asia, and they say, well, curry really is a house blend. So it really is your home blend of spices that you use to bring out the aromatics and whatever you have in a particular dish. So you can have all kinds of curries, and they don't necessarily have to be the same. And if you eat a lot of Thai, even Chinese, Indian type of cookings, you'll see red Thai curries, green Thai curries, East Indian butter curries. You'll see all sorts of different types of curry out there, and they really just signify that every house has its own blend. So I'm going to teach you kind of my blend that I work with, and because the garam masala usually comes in a whole blend spice, you need a mortar and pestle, or you can also use like a little spice grinder. If you have like a coffee grind, you can clean that out really nice. You can use a spice grinder for that as well. Or you can get finely ground ingredients. So a garam masala typically is a little bit of fennel, cumin, coriander, cinnamon, and cloves. So again, you can definitely use some ground cinnamon, some ground coriander, and maybe a little bit of ground cloves, or you can skip the cloves and just use cumin and coriander. It really is up to you, but we are going to play around with those aromatics and getting those flavors to kind of marry together and make a curry that works. One big thing you need today: salt, butter, cream, something to cover your chicken, so either that plain yogurt, Greek yogurt, or sour cream will work, and some tomato product. So I said tomatoes and tomato paste, but if you had crushed tomatoes and a little tomato paste, or fresh tomatoes and a little tomato paste, that'll work. It's about the consistency, right? We're still getting those tomato flavors melded together, but we're looking for a certain consistency. The other thing that you're going to need today is either a blender that can handle warmed food. So if you have like a good like Ninja blender, or a immersion blender is what I'm using today, or even a what's that thing I used earlier?
Little food processor?
A food processor. You could use a food processor. Anything that's going to blend up those ingredients today is going to be perfect. I love my KitchenAid immersion blender. I bought one for my mom this year, and I use it for so much stuff. It's so easy to use, and it's awesome for this recipe. So if you don't have one of those, or a food processor, or a blender, you can still make the recipe. It's not going to come together quite as well, but anything that you can use to bring all those flavors together towards the end is all you need. So to get us started today, we're going to preheat our oven right away to about 500. Yeah, let's do that. Let's bake at 500. So when everybody was asking me, are you going to post these recipes? Are you going to post this stuff? One thing that came to mind for me is that what I really wanted people to gain from these cooking classes is kind of realizing that it's about the technique, it's about the flavor, it's about building the flavor and understanding how that palate works and how the spices work together. So it's not necessarily about a very stringent recipe. Rachel knows I'm not a pastry chef. The science behind what I do comes down to a technique and a skill, less than it comes down to a very specific ingredient. So there's always key flavors that you need to hit to get an authentic recipe, but you can sub a lot of those flavors for different products, right? So if you don't have tomato paste, you can use crushed tomatoes and maybe a touch of sugar. What we're really looking for is finding that flavor profile that works and that is conducive to what that tastes like for us if we go order this out at a restaurant. This style is as authentic you can get, in my opinion, without having a tandoor oven. So I'm really excited because it is a little bit different way to do this. A lot of recipes for butter chicken are going to tell you to marinate the chicken for a day and use serrano peppers and use all this stuff. I've never found that the flavor permeates the chicken enough that that really makes sense. And the point of a butter chicken is to get a nice piece of charred chicken with a creamy tomato gravy, and then you're going to serve it with a little bit of dipping naan bread and some really nice fragrant rice. And so that's what we're going to do today without having that specialty oven, without having maybe a traditional naan bread, and maybe kind of just working with the stuff that we do have and the skill set that we have already. So we're going to get started with the rice. Rachel is going to portion that up for me. So again, that jasmine rice, I use a 1-to-1 ratio. So I'm going to do 1 cup of stock to 1 cup of jasmine rice. Bring it to a boil, little bit of salt, teaspoon of butter in the pot right away. And we're going to bring that to a boil, and then we're going to let it go to a simmer, cover the pot, and it only needs 8 minutes. One of the reasons I love jasmine rice, it doesn't take very much time. Now, if you really wanted a fragrant rice, you could also add some more authentic style spices, so some whole coriander, or maybe even some star anise, or something really fragrant to cook into that. I'm going to keep mine nice and plain today, and that's because we're going to get a lot of flavor out of the butter chicken sauce, so I don't really think that it's going to need a ton of extra fragrance to it. But if you wanted to use that rice for another Indian dish, or you wanted to have a little bit more flavor there, you could use some whole spices and cook that right into the rice. I know my 8-year-old is probably going to eat some of this leftover rice tomorrow, and she would like it if it just was plain, so that's what we're going to do today. But it's totally up to you. Play around with those spices. And so while my darling sister over here is getting that rice ready, I'm going to talk to you guys about our chicken. You want salt and butter. A little bit of salt and a teaspoon of butter would be just lovely. Here is the butter, here is your salt. How's that look? Is that a cup and a cup?
Yeah.
at it and I'm thinking, you know what? Let's do a cup and a half. That's going to work out a little better. Again, you might want to play around with exactly how that works out. Converted rice needs a little bit more water. Brown rice needs almost double the amount of water to the volume of rice. So we kind of play around. Basmati is a little bit different, but jasmine is typically 1-to-1. But my stock might have reduced a little bit, so I'm just going to add a little touch extra, and it's going to come out really nice. So, for the chicken, I put down thighs in the recipe, and I put down skin on. And then I went to the store, and there wasn't any skin on boneless thighs, so I decided to go skinless. The reason I like the skin is it crisps up really nice with the yogurt marinade, and it gives a nice browning Maillard reaction. But if you only got it with skin off, it's still going to come out really nice. You're just going to watch that cooking time a little bit because we're basically broiling the chicken to get that nice brown texture. It just might not need as long as if you have skin on. So the skin on just takes a little bit longer to brown. It's also going to baste it a little better, so there'll be more fat. So we're just going to be mindful of that. If you've got skin on thighs, you might just want to cook it for a little bit longer. So we're going to take those thighs and we're going to put them into our bowl here. And so I'm making like a little bit more than 4 people's worth of butter chicken today. And that's because it was my brother's birthday yesterday, and my gift to him is I'm going to bring him dinner for the next couple nights. So I'm going to make a little bit extra. But about 6 or 7 thighs, bone in or bone out. Bone in again will take us a little bit longer, but we're going to heat it to 175 degrees regardless. So really just making sure we have our thermometer there and we can temp those thighs. Bone in will always take a little bit longer. Skin on might take a little bit longer. So just be mindful regardless of the product. And if you ended up getting chicken breast or any other cuts of chicken, just be mindful of that temperature. So as long as the browning happens and the temperature is right, we're going to be able to use that product regardless. I just like the thighs primarily because there's more collagen and more fat to a chicken thigh. So you're going to get a little bit more forgiving of cooking time, and that means that it's going to brown up really nice. So the way we get that browning is from our yogurt, or if you're me, sour cream today. So the sour cream or the yogurt has some sugars and some fat in it that you wouldn't get from a typical citrus and spice marinade alone. So that's why we're doing that. We're adding that little bit of fat, that little bit of sugar, and we're not marinating for very long. We're going to let this yogurt sit in there. So for about 6 or 7 chicken thighs, which is about 3 or 4 people's worth of chicken for this recipe, you're going to need about a cup of yogurt. And you just want to cover the chicken just enough so that it's all coated in the yogurt. It doesn't need to be thick and dripping with yogurt, because then when it cooks, you're going to have that residual moisture at the end, and we really want to see that char. The only other thing we're putting in this marinade is about a tablespoon of salt. That's it. So we're just going to put that salt in that yogurt or sour cream, if you're me, and we're just going to cover that chicken so that each piece has a little bit of coating so that it browns up really nice. So we got that oven nice and hot at 500 degrees, and I brought my rack in my oven to the top rack. So not right under where it broils, because that's a little too close to the burner and my chicken will actually probably touch the burner. So I have mine just underneath that, so there's just enough space so the chicken is as close to that broiler and close to that heat as possible without touching that heat. So we want to bring it up nice and high, and they're very small pieces, so they're only really going to cook for maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes at most, and then we're going to make sure that that comes up to about 175 degrees. So we're going to get that ready, we're going to let that soak, and while we're doing that, we're going to get our spice blend ready. So in the recipe ingredients we have cumin, which if you also got garam marsala, is also in the garam marsala typically. So you're not going to want to add too much cumin if you already have garam masala, because there will be some in there. So for the cumin for today, for my recipe, I'm going to use about a teaspoon of cumin in there. Turmeric. Turmeric. I love it. It makes it yellow. It honestly does not have any huge amount of flavor in my personal opinion. Most of the reason I use turmeric in anything is because of the color. So we're going to use about a teaspoon of that too. It does have a bit of flavor. It is a distinct flavor, but it's not very overpowering. And with the other spices in this blend, you're not going to have it be too turmeric-y. But it is part of the curry dish because it adds that really distinct orange flavor. Chili adds a little bit of spiciness. Again, butter chicken traditionally is quite mild, but if you wanted to spice it up, you could add a serrano pepper, you could add a little bit of jalapeno perhaps. We're working with a dish that has kind of been westernized, so it is based essentially on a tikka masala, which is a British Indian cuisine. But the actual first butter chicken was originated in India, in northern India in the 1950s, but it wasn't labeled a butter chicken. It was actually used to use up leftover tandoor oven chicken that they didn't want to go bad in a creamy sauce, because those were the things that this particular chef had left over. So it was a really great way to utilize that. It became very popular, and in Manhattan in about 1975, there was a famous chef there that termed the dish butter chicken, served with naan over rice, and then after that it kind of spread, and it's become a very popular dish for Indian style cooking, and it uses a lot of Indian practice and a lot of Indian flavors, but essentially in a lot of ways it is more of a westernized dish. You'd see it a lot more in Canada, the United States, and Britain, but it's kind of based on the same principles of tikka masala. So we are going to use about a teaspoon of chili. So far we have about a teaspoon of chili, a teaspoon of turmeric, and a teaspoon of cumin. So the garam marsala, I'm going to use about a teaspoon and a half of that garam marsala. So mine, of course, is the full seeds and grains, so they need to be broken down. So I'm going to use my mortar and pestle, but if you have a spice blender that you'd like to use, you can use that as well. Or if you're using maybe some ground coriander and a little extra cumin, maybe a touch of cloves, this is really your spice blend. So we're going to build that curry ourselves, which is the flavor pot of the house. And my flavor part of the house uses a little bit extra garam masala in tune with the other ingredients. And we're going to grind that down as much as possible. Again, remember that we are going to puree this later, so we release those flavors from the spices, and then we're going to cook them in our butter and in our onions and tomatoes and really bring out all of that beautiful flavor from them. So I'm just going to grind that up until it's more or less ground together. You are going to release that a little bit more, but you wouldn't want to keep those spices whole. So this is kind of the color of mine. A little yellow, a little red. It's kind of got that nice orangey color. Once it mixes in with the nice caramelized onions and the tomatoes and the redness from the tomato paste, we're going to see that nice, beautiful orange red color that you see from a typical butter chicken. So that's what I have for my spice blend. Now the other two spices, seasonings that we're using today are fresh ginger and fresh garlic. So I like to use fresh ginger and garlic in all of my recipes. I really almost never use a garlic powder or a garlic paste. I don't use a ground ginger either. And that's because there is no comparison to flavor for me with ground ginger and fresh ginger. Just like powdered garlic powder does not replicate what fresh garlic does. So we're just going to pretend it doesn't exist, and we're going to use fresh. So I'm going to use this fresh ginger. There's my spoon. we use fresh ginger in our Thai soup recipe, and I don't know if you guys remember, but I like to cut a little chunk off. So I'm going to use about a full teaspoon of fresh ginger. So I like to cut a little chunk off, and then I like to use the back of my spoon and just peel all that garlic, ginger rind off of there with the back of the spoon. Keeps it nice and fragrant, make sure that we don't lose too much of that actual spice component, and then perhaps cut off any little tiny ends. Make sure we have one nice slice. And then I'm going to mince that up. So I'm going to cut it into chunks, and I'm going to do about the same with my garlic. So for this recipe, I have all these little tiny pieces of garlic, but I would say like 2 large garlic cloves would be perfect. I have a bunch of little tiny ones today, so I'm going to use that. Again, with the curry, we're really trying to blend those spices together and really create a new flavor palette out of the combination of spices that we have. So those dried spices, which we're going to release the oils from when we saute them on high heat. Of course, saute means that we use high heat with the onions and the tomatoes, and they're going to really meld in together and create that really authentic curry scent, which I'm sure that as soon as we get started, your whole house is going to smell like for the rest of the day, and you're going to love it. So with the garlic, I'm going to use about 4 small cloves or 2 large cloves, and I'm going to mince them up. They don't have to be totally perfectly minced because we are, again, going to puree this in its entirety later. So just a nice, small, rough chop. No need to get crazy about it. And we're going to clean those up, and we're going to chop them up with our garlic and our ginger together because we're going to add them at the same time. Alright, so my oven is preheated, but I'm going to let those chicken thighs just marinate for a couple minutes longer while we get our spice blend ready and our mise en place. You know, you're all like such great chefs now, cooking at home and learning about your mise en place, and I know that there is probably nothing cooler to me than knowing how excited my mom gets about making her own vegetable and chicken stock at home now. It has changed her cooking. My sister and I were talking today, and we both said, you know, the funny thing is, Mom was never ever a bad cook, even remotely. Growing up, you know, she was one of my favorite people to have cook for me, and it might not have been her favorite thing all of the time, but she was never bad at it, and she always seasoned well. But what I really want her to gain, and all of you guys to gain from these classes, is learning about the technique and kind of learning about how to get the most out of your ingredients and how to not let your sister forget about rice on the stove. Oh. Did it burn? It's okay, I got you. It's really about learning about the techniques, right? So that when you are in a situation where it's like, wow, I would really love to... Okay, that didn't work. We're going to do that again. Oh, is it broken? Yeah, it's okay. I got you, girl.
Okay, sorry.
I got you.
I thought you were going to get it.
It's all good. Really want to gain that idea that if we really wanted to make a certain style of a dish, or we really were looking for a, you know, type of flavor palette, that we can work with the things that we have. Because we don't always have, you know, Garam marsala on hand. We don't always have, you know, buttermilk on hand. Well, how can we replicate the same type of ingredients with something maybe we do always have on hand, which most people have milk. Most people have some sort of a stock. How can we make our own stock? You know, things like that is what I really want people to gain from what we've been doing with these classes. And so I think that that's kind of what we're geared towards, right? Is learning about the ingredients, learning a little bit about the history, learning about how those things came together, and then learning the technique that we need to get the most out of our ingredients. So, that rice, I'm going to bring to a boil here, and then I'm going to let come back down. Teaspoon of butter, a little bit of salt. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Stir that up. chicken is ready to go. Hopefully your oven is preheated. Before we get started with the chicken here, I just wanted to check in, make sure there wasn't anybody who had any questions so far, any concerns, anything we need to touch on before we move ahead with the chicken. I talk a lot. Sometimes I need to make sure that I answer your questions too. So I'll give you a moment here and get that rice going. And we got our pans ready. So we had that chicken marinating in the yogurt and the salt. And what we're going to do now is we're going to get it on the pan, get it in the oven, and then we're going to finish off that mise en place for our sauce. So funnily enough, butter chicken actually gains more in the sauce from the cream than the actual butter. We actually use very little butter in a butter chicken recipe, and so I always think it's really funny because the name has the word butter in it, but you wouldn't use any more butter in this recipe than any other kind of sauce, in my particular opinion, that you would be making, whether that's a pasta sauce, like an authentic Italian sauce, or anything else French-wise. You really wouldn't use any more butter than you do here. But you really gain that flavor from the cream. So we're going to take that chicken out and put it on our pan. So we have the chicken thighs. They're all nice and creamily covered in yogurt. And we're going to spray down our grate a little bit. Oh, you sprayed it for me? Oh, well, thank you very much. My pan is already sprayed. We're going to put a little bit of pan spray over that just to keep it from sticking.
Can't make rice, but I can spray a pan.
She can't make rice, but she can spray a pan. My favorite culinary grad. Alright, we're going to take those chicken thighs. Again, I have a little extra here because I'm making a little bit extra for my wonderful brother who just turned 27 yesterday. And I didn't know what to get him, so he is getting a variety of food, one of which is butter chicken. But if you have about 6 or 7 of those thighs, that is more than enough for our recipe tonight. And we're just going to spread them out, all those pieces, for a little bit of space in between, making sure that there's nice even coverage of that yogurt on all of the pieces, spreading them out on the pan, making sure that that pan that grate is right over top of our tin foil so that it collects all of those juices. So there we go. Yogurt covered chicken on the grate, on the pan, little tin foil. It's going to go in that super duper hot oven, and we're going to give it about 7-8 minutes like that, and then we're going to take a look at it and turn it around. Now, depending on your oven, some ovens have hot spots. Some ovens, the broiler works really fast. So just be careful, just be mindful while we have it in there to take a look and see to turn it a little bit more. I can't see if I'm getting any comments here.
I looked at them before.
Rachel, you can keep me. Okay. Sorry, guys. All right. So Donna, yes, it was chili powder that I was using. Yes. And yes, the chicken was marinated in the yogurt. Just a little bit of salt. Just let it sit for about 10 minutes or so. Just to let that yogurt kind of cover the entire piece of the thighs. And then now we have them in the oven at 500 degrees. So hopefully you're all just about there. We're gonna move on. We've got our spice blend for our curry. We've got some garlic and some ginger minced up, and we're going to move on to our onion, which again, we're going to chop in a small dice, which is pretty typical of anything that you would saute like this in a small batch, just because it's going to get more evenly cooked. But we're not worried about the presentation because, again, we are going to puree that. So, onion. This is something I always forget. I've just done so many times. I'm going to really take my time today because I know everybody likes to know about the onion. So I always cut the ends off. Now, I like to be kind of generous with cutting the ends off, and that's because I make a lot of stock. So I am going to cut those ends off, clean them up, take all of those gritty outside pieces off of there. I usually give my veg stock chunks a little bit of a rinse before I make my veg stock, but I like to keep them nice and clean as they go into my little veg stock container for later. And then I take my knife and I pop it like this. Maybe not something that everybody feels really comfortable doing, but I make a little slit in it just so that I can peel off that top layer of the onion. So I get a nice clean piece to work at. If there's any little weird pieces that you don't want there, cut those off. And if you have a nice rind, keep that for your veg stock. All right, so we got that all cleaned up. We're gonna chop that onion. I cut it in half and then 2 slits like so. Turn it on its side and then cut across about 3-4 times and then turn it again and cut across, and there you have a small dice. I'm so excited that optometrists are back in business because I wear contacts, and that is my secret to not crying watching onions. It has been my secret. Oh, don't tell my apprentice chefs over the years. They thought that I was just like some sort of superhero. It's that I wore contacts and they kept me from crying. And now I've been stuck with my glasses for so long, I forget how awesome it was to wear contacts. So once you're done crying, and don't make it about the onions. I know you're just sad because it's kind of our last class together. One thing I will tell you is that over the summer, I'm very excited that we're going to be doing some family classes. So I really want to do a couple segments. My neighbor had mentioned, hey, you know, you should really do some classes for kids. And I thought, yeah, that's great. And someone else said, you know, I'd really love to do something I can do with my kids. So I thought, yeah, that sounds awesome. So instead of continuing this class every Monday, summer starts to get ramped up. Things are kind of getting back to a different type of normal. We are going to continue on. I'm going to do a special event probably once a month where we're going to do some classes that might be more kid palate friendly, but also stuff that you can bring your kids into the kitchen and do together. I have some friends kind of all over Saskatchewan that have been doing this class with their families, and I'm just so proud. Allison Ward, if you're watching with your families out in Carrot River and all over the province, you have no idea how excited I am that you guys get to attend this class with me and get to maybe learn something different that you would have never made before. And so we're going to keep that going, especially with the kids this summer. So look out for that event as it comes up when we get to it. But don't cry because it's our last day. I'll cry for us later.
Just cry for the onions.
Just cry for the onions. All right. So we have our onions cut, and then we have our tomatoes. So like I said before, I forgot to get big tomatoes, but I have a couple small tomatoes, and I'm going to just rough chop those guys because I want some fresh tomato in there because that's going to make a big difference. Fresh tomato product is really nice, but if you couldn't get fresh tomatoes for whatever reason, say you were teaching a cooking class today and you just straight up forgot, you can use some tomato product. You can use a little bit of crushed tomatoes. Again, it's about consistency, so tomatoes tend to be quite water-based, so just be mindful if you're using a different type of tomato product that you might need to reduce a little bit further, or maybe not quite add so much stock or cream to it to get that desired thickness, which this sauce does come out like a gravy, right? Without using flour or cornstarch, we make it quite thick. And that's from the veggies being pureed and sauteed down with the cream and the stock. So we are going to replicate that, but if you didn't have fresh tomatoes today, there are other things you can use. I need to get my tomato paste. So the other thing that we're using today is tomato paste. I said a small can. I should have said about 156 milliliters, which is a really small can. It's my hand. This is the can. It's tiny. Don't even. But if you want to use a little bit more tomato paste to savor from using fresh tomatoes, you could. And it will be a very similar dish. The thing with tomato paste that I find the most is that it's very basic, so you might need a little bit of sugar, which we might play around with. most people have sugar on hand. So we'll just see how it turns out, and we'll get that nice desired texture. All right. So my rice is on a 4-minute timer. It really doesn't take that long. We're gonna let it cool off because we're gonna pour it onto the side of the plate, pour our butter chicken sauce with our chicken mixed in, and we're going to put that naan bread or our similar type naan bread on the side as well. So one thing that we have here is we're getting our pan nice and hot. So I bring it to a high heat, and this is the only time you see butter in this recipe. I know, it's crazy, right? So I'm gonna take about a tablespoon and a half of butter. And like we kind of talked about before, when you're using butter to saute, one really nice thing that you can do is add a little touch of oil to that butter, canola, vegetable oil, to help protect the butter from browning too fast and burning in the pan. So I'm going to use just a tablespoon and a half of butter to about a half tablespoon of oil to keep it from burning. And then I'm going to take those lovely onions and tomatoes, and we're going to add that right away to the pan. And get that in there looking good. All right. So saute, right? We're sauteing, so high heat, hot fat. If it doesn't sizzle when it hits the pan, you are not sauteing. That is something else. It is not sauteing. High heat, hot fat. In the pan, hear that sizzle? That's a saute. That's the basis for every single stir fry or anything like it you'll ever make. The total point of stir fry is hot heat, sizzle in the pan. So we're sauteing here because we want the onions to caramelize a little bit, have that Maillard reaction, so where the sugars hit the high heat and create that little bit of browning, and then we're going to cook them till they're almost translucent. So we're going to leave this for about maybe 30 more seconds just to kind of integrate the tomatoes and the onions and the butter. And once that's kind of sit for a minute, we're going to add that fresh ginger and garlic, both of them together, right in there. Again, sauteing, so keeping that on a nice high heat. But the butter is going to protect that ginger and garlic from burning, right? We don't want to get a charred flavor on the garlic. We want to see that nice sweetness from the garlic. Another way you could do that is you could even roast your garlic first and add a very sweetened roasted garlic, which would make a big difference there as well. So, again, this is your curry, your home, your spice blend. Make it what tastes good for you. Make it make sense. Make it something you want to eat again. It's not just about my recipe. It's about the technique, it's about the palate, but it's your recipe. It's your style, but my technique. And my technique is a lot of people's technique. So it's not really all that personal. And if we were baking bread, or if we were making, chocolate mousse, or something that took a little bit more specific scientific ingredient, I would definitely share the exact recipe. But in terms of what we do here in these little cooking classes, I don't necessarily have an exact recipe. It's all kind of in my head. And it's what I have, and it's what we work with all the time, and it's about moving with those ingredients, right? The fresher your ingredients, the better flavor you're going to get. But it really is about finding that balance for yourself. And you can watch a cooking show that gives you the exact ingredients and the exact amounts, and you're going to get the same result every time. But you will not come away with the same idea of understanding how to make it that way, how to work with what you have, as much as you will from gaining from technique and skill. So, my rice is about done. I'm going to take it off the heat here for a minute and just stir in a little bit extra butter. And I'm going to cover that up, and I'm going to leave it on the side for when we're all done. All right. So we've had our chicken in for a few minutes now. I'm going to take a look. It's not browning up too much. Probably needs a little bit extra time. But what I'm going to make sure that we get that even cooking throughout and it's the proper temperature to serve. All right, so our onions and tomatoes have been sauteing. They look wonderful. We're going to turn that heat down and we're going to add our curry. Oh, look at that. And we're going to cover up those onions and tomatoes, and immediately that fragrance is released, and oh my goodness, I love the smell of my own curry. Maybe I shouldn't say that. That could be taken a lot of ways. I'm going to add a little bit of pepper to mine too. But you don't have to. If you'd like it to be a little bit pepperier, I like to add a little bit of pepper. Of course, at this point, in the beginning of our cooking process, we should add a little bit of salt. So I'm going to go with about a teaspoon to start. There isn't really a lot of salty things going into this other than our chicken, but just be mindful of the flavors as they move around and as they start to move in together. We're not going to add too much salt at the beginning. We'll taste while we go. So we'll add some salt later. So we got all those spices in there. They're cooking out. Smells fabulous. And our chicken is still cooking. You want that chicken to cook a little bit first so that when it is done, we can bring it out to cool, and then we can add that nice charred brown yogurt covered chicken to our sauce at the end. So, got all the spices in. Rachel, have there been other comments that I need to address? Because they don't seem to be coming up on my screen. Is there any way you can check on that for me?
I will check.
You're so great. Thank you very much. Okay, so we also have our cream at the ready. Cream is going to come in at the very end of our kind of cooking process here. To balance out all those wonderfully aromatic spices and our beautiful home curry here. All right, so we have
telling you how great you are, and Donna asked, how did you put the stock in the pan?
Zoe. We're going to put the stock in the pan. It doesn't have
No stock in that pan.
No, I haven't put any stock yet into my onions and tomatoes. I only put stock in with the rice, but we are going to use stock right now, Donna. It's funny you bring it up. You were right on top of things. You were a step ahead. So just to deglaze the pan, so we don't want to lose any of that lovely spice from here. So I'm actually going to show you. Because I can, I'm going to show you. Okay, so here is my pan. So see how I'm starting to get those little gristly bits, but the pan isn't coated? And that's why we use a little bit of the oil with the butter to keep it from sticking to the bottom of the pan. We want those little bit of sugars to caramelize with the spices there from the onions and the tomatoes, but we don't want it to stick to the bottom because then it's going to burn and we're going to get that bitter taste. So we're going to use our veggie or chicken stock that I assume we all made, because we all know how to do that. A little bit, maybe a teaspoon, maybe a tablespoon, and we're just going to let that break up all that tasty flavor. So if your pan ends up getting charred, especially if it gets quite charred from using too high of heat, you might want to switch into a different pan so that those residual flavors do not come into your final dish. We deglaze kind of as we go to keep that nice tasty pieces of the spice blend together and part of the dish, but we don't want it to ever burn. That's why I don't add the garlic and the ginger right away. I let the moisture come out of the tomatoes a little bit to keep the pan from burning at the bottom. So that's partially due to the fat that we add at the beginning. It's also partially due to the natural moisture that comes from the vegetables. But deglazing is a really important part of making sure that we get all of those delicious flavors from the spices and from the butter and from all those lovely things that are working at the bottom of the pan. So you always kind of deglaze as you go. So I'll bring this back for a second for you. Okay, so we deglaze at the stock so that when we do this, there's no burning happening. Nothing is charred here. This is all beautiful tastiness that's going to go into our final sauce. All right, so that's on the stove. Our onions are getting quite translucent now. That spice blend is really worked in there. So the next thing we're going to do is add the major tomato component, and I am using a little can of tomato paste. Again, you could replicate with some crushed tomatoes or even a regular tomato sauce, which will be a little bit more watery, so just be mindful of that. It will also probably be sweetened, so just be mindful of that and your final flavor, that you might not need to add sugar at the end. If you're using tomato paste, there's a good chance that you will have to add a little bit of sugar just to round out that spiciness, that bitterness from the spices and the tomato paste, which itself is quite potent. Tomato paste on its own, that's why we only need a little tiny can. So we're going to add all that. It's so tiny, it doesn't even come out with my regular spatula. So I'm going to have to get my little spatula. Nope, can't find it. Looks like I'm going to use a stick. Working with what you have, that's the name of the game. That's a true cook for you. Alright. So, of course, as I always say with these things that we use out of the can, you want to give that a bit of a rinse to get all that tasty taste out of there. So we don't want to add too much water, because we're going to add stock and cream at the end as well. But just a little stir with a little rinse, water rinse in there, just to make sure we get all that flavor stuck on the inside of the can. We're not wasting anything here. Pour that in too. Beautiful. We're going to stir that tomato paste around. We've got this beautiful red, orange color from the turmeric and the chili and the curry powder that we have created, our home blend curry. I'm going to mix that all around and let it be fully coated. And then I'm going to add about another tablespoon of veggie stock just to keep those onions from coating the bottom of the pan and burning. I'm going to mix that in a little bit too. It looks like my timer is going off for my chicken. So let's take a look at that chicken here. Ah, beautiful. Whew. So there we go. I have some nice browned chicken. Again, you're going to get a much nicer texture from a bone in, or sorry, a skin on. You'll get a little longer cooking time with a bone in. Or a skin on, but the skin on is really going to make it a lot nicer and browner, but that was not in the cards for us today, so mine are skin off. That being said, I don't know about you guys, but I could definitely use less calories in my dinner than I have had lately, so no worries. I know this is done, but for the sake of being totally and completely on top of everything, let us take our thermometer, digital or otherwise, and let's just take one of those nice big pieces right in the center. If you have bone in, make sure that that thermometer isn't touching directly on the bone, and let's just make sure that that registers over 170, preferably 175, although this is going to rest and go back into the sauce, so as long as it's 170, you should be good. It surely is. Actually, it's almost exactly 175. Oh, it's like I've been doing this for a while. Good one. Rachel, thank you. Thank you from the Peanut Gallery over here. Yes. My assistant Rachel, everyone. Woo, woo, woo! Doing a great job. So all right, so this sauce is looking extra tomatoey, extra lovely. We have it down all the way to low now, so we're gonna let that simmer out really nice. Oh, I have a little extra spices on there too. In there. Okay, so that's going to reduce down. While it does, take a look at it. If it seems like it's not, if it's sticking to the pan at all, even on low, we're going to add a little bit more of that veggie or chicken stock. So I'm going to go like a good half cup here, because I know that with my propane burners, it reduces quite quickly. And we want that to reduce down for probably another, I'd say 10 minutes or so. It's looking quite lovely. And so one thing is that if you don't have your cream out, I would suggest taking it out now, and that's so that it comes to closer to a room temperature. You don't want it to be hot on the table, although if you wanted to warm it up in a saucepan first to add to the curry, to the butter chicken sauce, you absolutely could. I like to take mine out a little bit early and just let it come to room temperature so that we can add to the sauce, because the sauce is going to be hot, so whatever we put into it should be a similar temperature. If you're adding cold anything to a hot sauce, there's more likelihood that it's going to separate, or it's not going to mix in as well, or it at least will take you a lot longer for it to come to temperature for you to serve. With cream, it is high fat, so it's not going to curdle ever in a million years. It will not curdle. We're going to add that right to the sauce. But we're using a high acidity based sauce with a lot of spices, so if you were using, say, a whole milk, you would not get the desired consistency out of this sauce. You need to have that heavy cream. Not a lot of it, but you need heavy cream, or it will not work right, and then you will be very disappointed. And the last thing we want is to do all this work and have our butter chicken sauce turn out less than awesome. Okay, so we have this simmering. Beautiful sauce. Stop. We're going to keep our eyes on that every couple minutes. Make sure that it is staying away from burning at the bottom of the pan. So depending on how much heat you have on it. So like I said, my propane heats really fast. So I'm going to keep checking on it and adding a little bit of stock as we go. In a bit, we are going to taste that sauce and see if we need to add a little bit of sugar, maybe a little bit of salt. While we are waiting for that and letting our chicken rest, I'm going to talk to you about naan bread. So I really wanted to talk about making your own homemade naan bread in class today, but it in its own right is its own class. Not because it's extremely difficult, but just because it takes time. It is a yeast and yogurt based dough for essentially a flatbread. Typical and traditional naan bread would be cooked in a tandoor oven, so we don't have that. I don't know anybody who has that, so I wouldn't call it naan bread, but a very similar product can be achieved through the right technique. Didn't want to go over that today because I really wanted to spend time learning about curry and learning about the sauce and making sure that that came out right. So I suggested that you could make your own, or you could buy some, so I did both. I bought a naan bread, little tiny naan breads from the Fresh Mart here at Esterhazy today, and that was lovely. It cost me under $5, so it wasn't expensive. But if you wanted to make something your own that is very traditional, there's plenty of recipes online. I guarantee you none of them are using a tandoor oven, which would really contribute to the actual texture that you're getting. A similar product can be achieved though in a less traditional way. So my sister worked really hard today and made us some Italian flatbread. So this was a recipe that was asked for me to post by a friend online, Andrea, if you're watching, hi, who makes her own pizza dough. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but she is incredible. I want to share this recipe with you because I personally find it a little easier to make than a naan bread. It works really well to a lot of different types of cuisine, and it is very, very similar to a naan bread without yeast or the amount of time. And I just didn't want to do the time. But I could definitely find something similar to that and kind of talk a little bit more about it. But this Italian flatbread is truly as close as I can get to a naan bread in the same amount of time. This took us, like, in total, like 40 minutes to make. So really not a lot of time there. No yeast, so you're not worried about that rising. You're not worried about having to keep an eye on it too much, and it's super quick to make. So this is the Italian flatbread recipe that we used. Comes out really similar. I'm going to post the recipe after this for you guys, and I find that it's just the easiest to make with what you have at home and is very similar. So this is the bought naan bread. So for me, the difference in texture is that the naan bread is a little softer. It has a little bit more give to it. The Italian flatbread though is just a little bit, it's got a little bit more of a denser texture, but the recipe goes further. So Rachel made 4 pieces in 40 minutes. This will last my family for 2 days. Like, we'll use half of a slice of this for butter chicken tonight each, and we'll have another half slice tomorrow. My daughter, who's 8 and a very picky eater, doesn't love all naan breads If you can believe that, what a simple thing to not love. But she loves this Italian flatbread. So that was also one of the reasons that I used that tonight. But there are lots of recipes online for similar style naan breads. I just wouldn't call it that. So if you're not going to be authentic, you might as well go in a different direction and call it what it is. This is actually called a piatta, which is the Italian flatbread that is used for a lot of pizzas and similar things. So it's very easy to use in a lot of different recipes, but if you like that softer kind of texture, even this President's Choice naan bread, yeah, so they use buttermilk. So I would use yogurt and maybe ghee, which is clarified butter, Indian clarified butter, which is just butter removing the milk solids. Clarified butter, we might have to do a class on that sometime.
Clarified butter.
But I wouldn't even say that this is that close to what I would say is traditional. When I see a traditional naan bread, when I go to an authentic Indian restaurant, you can tell it's been cooked in a high heat oven. It has big pockets. It's almost like a pita, a Mediterranean style pita, where it has big pockets, browning kind of all over, and it's not super dense. It's fluffy, and the texture is kind of in its own. So I didn't feel like it was appropriate for me to attempt making something I didn't think I had the equipment to do. So I made my own version. So we're just crossing over some different planes of cooking today. We're gonna make butter chicken with Italian flatbread, but I also have naan bread from the grocery store, which you're gonna try. Typically, I would be the first person to say it's best if you make it at home. So I will post this recipe for you. But really, anything that's kind of in that flatbread type scenario is going to do the same thing that you'd want it to do in this recipe, and that's hold a little bit of rice and a lot of sauce and be able to eat it all at once. You want to be able to dip it. So really, wherever you want to be, that's where you're going to be today. That's just what I do. So I will post that for you guys later, and you can take a look. And I would love to know what you think. I would love to know your own naan bread recipes or stuff that you've used in the past that has worked for you. I just know that this one is going to be loved by my family tonight, so that's what I went with. But I would love to hear what you guys had to say. So, we're almost ready. We're almost ready to puree. Oh, that's nice and deeply red sauce. Those onions have cooked down really nicely. And my chicken is cool enough to cut. So the chicken is cool enough to cut, and we have that nice browning over top. We're gonna add our cream. So for this recipe, I'm gonna use about 3/4 of a cup of cream. That's gonna make it quite rich, quite creamy, and we're gonna cook that down for a little bit. If you'd like it to be a little less creamy, of course you can add a little bit less cream, but you definitely need a couple tablespoons of heavy cream in this dish for it to be a butter chicken, or you're not going to achieve that well-rounded flavor. So I'm gonna add about 3/4 of a cup, because I know I'm using tomato paste, and I know that it's going to be quite tomatoey, and I would like it to be rounded out. I'm also going to add a little bit of water, because it's the end of my cream, and I want to make sure I get all that flavor out there, because I don't like waste. More than I dislike most things, I dislike waste the most. So we're just going to do that, and we're just going to let that simmer just for like a minute or two, just enough to bring that cream up to temperature. And now we have this really beautiful orangey colored sauce, and you can already see that yes, it is very similar to the butter chicken we've grown to know and love. So I'm going to give that a minute, let the cream kind of work into the sauce, and then we're going to give it a taste. While that's happening, let's cut this chicken. So again, I used a skinless chicken thigh for the fat and collagen content, which I love, and it's not going to need a lot done to it, but we want to cut it into about 1-inch chunks, whatever, bite-sized chunks. Whatever you like. I like to do about 1 inch chunks so that we still get those nice pieces. And I really don't love going to have a butter chicken and have the chicken kind of melded into everything. I like to have a nice piece of chicken with that char, and it's a little separate and distinct from the sauce itself, but it is part of the sauce, right? And that's why I like to use those chicken thighs, and that's why we use the sour cream or the yogurt coating that we do to get that browning, because an authentic butter chicken would have that tandoor oven charredness. So we're trying to replicate that with what we have, right? So we're trying to get that. You could also do a similar marinade and barbecue. That would give you a really similar texture. We're really looking for that nice chunks of charred pieces of chicken where that Maillard reaction has happened, and we're seeing that nice kind of grilled texture, so that when we bite into that bite of sauce, we definitely get a piece of chicken, we definitely get a piece of the curry, we get a piece of the cream, but it's all working together to create that well-rounded dish. So I'm going to check out all that chicken. Looks beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Rachel!
In the grocery store. I like them chicken thighs.
Chicken thighs.
Chicken
All right.
thighs.
I'll wash up my hands here real quick. Tidy up my station a little bit. Apologies. This one was not easiest on the dishes, I know. I'm very bad for that. I'm so used to having someone employed as a dishwasher. Sometimes I just forget.
Yeah.
All right. So our chicken is ready to go. We're going to taste the sauce. And it is, well, oh, it's beautiful looking. Okay. So I really have a lot of good flavor with the spices. I'm really happy with the spices. Again, with this curry, with butter chicken, very traditionally it is mild curry, so we're not looking for super hot. If you wanted to add a little bit of heat, you absolutely can. I'm keeping it quite mild today. I'm happy with this, but it needs a little bit of sugar. It's not quite sweet enough for me. So I'm going to add about 1.5 teaspoons of sugar, and that's very typical of when we're using tomato paste as a base, as opposed to just tomatoes or tomato sauce, which would have added sugar. We're just creating that same type of flavor. The tomato paste is nicer because it's a condensed tomato product, so we don't need to worry about reducing for as long to get the right consistency, but it lacks that sweetness. So we are going to add a little bit of sugar, and then again, let that kind of reduce down. And then you're almost ready to puree that sauce. So let's find, oh, yeah, look at this, look at this. We're going to use this beautiful plate for our plating today. So I have my chicken here. Doesn't go in until the sauce is pureed. So we're going to puree that sauce, get a beautiful consistency throughout the sauce, then add the chicken. So it's one big scoop of chicken, rice, sauce, beauty. Dip it with our naan bread or our Italian flatbread, depending on who you are and what you have. All right, let's taste a little bit of that. Very nice. Mine needs a touch more salt. So let's taste. That's why we taste at the beginning and at the end for seasoning. Yeah, great. Now, be mindful of your salt because there is salt on our chicken, right? So we don't want to oversalt our sauce, or else the whole thing is going to be a little oversalted. So just be mindful while you're tasting. Chicken's going to go in there. We're going to taste it again. I'm going to shut that right off because we're about ready to puree that bad boy. Ready? She loves it.
Yeah. That's like my whole job right there. Like, that's what you do.
You mean you're the
pureer?
You are a lot of things. Wonderful, eclectic, interesting. You look like me.
Yeah.
But you sound different. You're my hype man. That's why you go, yeah! You doing a great job? Yeah! There it is. Alright. We're going to take our beautiful food processor or what do you call it? Food processor or immersion blender.
Immersion blender.
I only know kitchen terms. And you really want to get that nice and consistent, right? So we want to get all those big chunks from the onions and the tomatoes right down. So the consistency of that sauce should be that when we pour it over the rice, it can kind of pour over, but it's not taking over the whole plate. Mm-hmm. It should stay together a little bit. You want it to be, they call it a tomato gravy, honestly. It's tomato gravy with cream. That's basically what we make. It is a sauce, but it's not necessarily like a reduction, or it's not syrupy. It's not a sauce like a, like a bolognese, right? That is going to get its texture from the ingredients. You're pureeing this sauce, yet it's not a puree. Mm-hmm. You're looking for it to be kind of a gravy texture. You want it to stay on the plate, but at the same time, you want things to be able to dip in it.
Yeah. So it doesn't really derive from a mother sauce.
No, it doesn't derive from a mother sauce. Excellent point, Rachel. Thank you.
Wow.
Yes, all of the sauces that would be considered a sauce are always a derivative of the mother sauces, which there are 5. Hollandaise. Come on.
Oh no, don't make me do this.
Velouté. Tomato. If anything, this is a derivative of tomato, but it's
bechamel.
And
Espagnole,
which is a brown sauce, which is kind of from a gravy, sort of.
It's kind of.
If anything, a curry would be a derivative of a tomato sauce.
Yeah.
Honestly, that is pretty much what we're doing. But because of the way it's prepared with the spices, it would be kind of its own thing. Probably closer to a gravy than a sauce.
Yeah.
If we were going to get technical about it.
If we're going to get technical.
We don't really need to do it here. We're just making butter chicken today,
We're
right?
just making some chicken.
If you're wondering, I've been drinking cold brew all day. So if I seem really excited about life, it's because I am.
Mother sauce!
Mother sauce? I get excited about mother sauces anyway, though. So let's not be fooled. That's just because I get excited to talk about mother sauces. Yes, mother sauces are the basis for all sauces. Any sauce that is an actual sauce is a derivative of the 5 mother sauces. Look at that. Look at how much we learned today.
Wow.
I know. We did so great. All right, my consistency for my butter chicken is looking quite lovely right now. I'm really happy about this. Oh man, I'm really happy about this. Okay, so I have nice consistency. I'm gonna add my chicken. Now I've got that nice and pureed down. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show go ahead and show you because you're far away over here, so I'm gonna show you. Look at this color. Look at that. What? Are we in an Indian restaurant? No. We're in Esterhazy, Saskatchewan, people. Making butter chicken. What?
It smells so good.
You should come up with a hashtag for me that incorporates Esterhazy and butter chicken. I was telling my sister Rachel that I really try to work on my Esterhazy.
Esther curry.
Esther curry?
Yeah.
Oh, I kind of like that. All right, you got your sauce puree, nice consistency, no big chunks. Although if you like it to be big chunks, you could. I like a nice and conformed sauce here. We're gonna add our yogurt-covered chicken, looking real beautiful. And we're going to stir that up a little bit. And then we're going to let it sit just for a minute, just to let that salt from the chicken kind of combine there. And while we're doing that, I will tell you about garnishes. So I didn't write it in the recipe list, which I'm very sorry. I should have done this. And the reason I didn't is because my family hates cilantro so much that even when I have it in the house, they do not like it. So I forgot to mention it. I apologize. But I like to use green onions as my garnish anyway. So I'm going to use green onions today. You could use a little fresh parsley even. Wouldn't be quite as authentic, but it adds a little bit of green. I like the onions because I love the taste of a fresh scallion on top of pretty much anything. I can get away with it. But cilantro would be very traditional to have a little cilantro, even a little slice of lime. But have fun. You guys always have fun, and you always send me your pictures, which, by the way, please send me your pictures today, because I'm going to make a kind of wrap-up couple posts with all of your beautiful, well-cooked dishes from the last 7 weeks. Wow, we've been doing this a while. From the last couple months, just to feature all of the local talent of cooks we have out here, and all the work that you guys have been doing. And you know, I just really want to showcase and shout out to you guys. I know you've been sticking with me through all this, and it's been a lot of fun. So come up with your own kind of garnish, and then text me, send me a picture, post on Facebook. All right. No, where does she keep going? Where does she keep getting all this food from?
Where?
I propagate my green onions. Yes, I do. Here, I'll show you.
Here, I'll show you.
I cut my green onions when they get down to their little baby whiteys down here. I cut the ends off just a little bit, but I keep a little bit of the strings, and then I put them back in the water, and they grow. I haven't bought green onions from the store in like 2 months because they keep growing. I actually take them from the water, and I actually take those little ends and I put them back into pots of dirt, and I continue to grow them. It was an experiment I tried out a few months ago that went horribly right. So I'm going to take those green onions, and what I like to do, well, of course, save the green onion ends for your stock, but I like to take them right on a bias. So if my cutting board is like this, I line up my onions just so, and then I stand on the opposite corner of my cutting board and slice across, making big, long strips sliced on a bias. That's how I like the garnish to look. Adds a little bit of flav to your dish, a little bit of color, a little bit of technique. Those bias onions, gorgeous. All right, so let's give this guy a taste over here. And make sure that that salt has come through. That's the biggest thing that we're looking for here. The yogurt is going to contribute to the creaminess of the dish overall, but mostly we're looking to make sure that that salt from the chicken has come through, and we don't need to add any more salt here. That's very good. I'm ready. Let's plate this. All right. So I like to cut my naan bread in half. I'm going to plate it on the corner of my dish. I'm going to grab a scoop of my jasmine rice. Okay. Look at all those chunks of nice brown chicken in a beautifully creamy sauce. I'm going to pour it slightly over my rice, kind of on the side there. Nice and saucy, nice and chickeny. Let's grab a few of those scallions. And because I like to, I'm going to put a little touch of fresh ground pepper on top.
Beautiful!
Butter chicken. Esther curry. That is my butter chicken. I am very excited to see all of your butter chickens, your Esther curries. It has been so much fun and an absolute pleasure to be with you these past 7 weeks. I'm not going to talk too long or else I'm going to cry, because as much as I want to continue on doing this, you know, it's been fun for me to be part of something that I could offer for free to the people around here, to the people that I know in BC and Fort Mac and all over Saskatchewan and all over the country that have been participating in these classes with me. It has been absolutely fun, and I have enjoyed every minute of it. But I have to get back to work, and I have to start making money. And I just really have enjoyed this time with you guys, and all the things that I've learned from relearning things that I've always made, and just getting to see everybody get excited about food and being from this area and getting to cook different things and supporting our local businesses, and being a part of that with you guys has just been incredible. And I'd like to say that if you have Yorkton Access 7 channel news, I will be featured for the first time Tuesday night at 7 p.m. One of our cooking, thank you, White Man, Peanut Gallery. One of our cooking shows will be aired for the first time that night, and there will be a continuation of some of our shows for the next little while. Some of my yoga channels will be on there as well. And if you missed today and you're watching this later, you know, it's great that I'm going to keep these on the website. I will keep these on our YouTube channel, and I will keep all of these shows on the Facebook page for you to look back at any time. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns, please don't feel hesitant to text me or PM me or call me. Just don't show up at my house yet. We're not ready for that yet. But soon, soon you can come over. All right, it has been a pleasure, guys. I can't wait to see all of your lovely butter chickens, and I will see you in person very soon. Bon appetit.